Negative, Ghost Rider.
I mean, that's fine. I don't care if you don't see me, but like, it would be nice to know if I show up on camera. Oh, hey, I guess we're live. Look at that. Fantastic. Hey, everybody. I'm John. This is Caitlyn, and we're here to talk to you about Cyber-Juche, how North Korea's self-reliance treated a global hacking force, or said slightly differently, how Kim got his groove back using hackers. By means of quick introductions, I'm John Doyle. This is Caitlyn Leong. We will introduce ourselves in just a second, and we'll appropriately start off by saying we are here representing ourselves, not our companies. Cool. With that out of the way, I'm John Doyle. I'm the CTI Services Director for Palo Alto Unit 42. I've been covering North Korea for about 10 plus years at this point, longstanding background at Mandiant and then also at the CIA. Over to you, Caitlyn.
Thanks, John. I am currently a threat analyst at Mandiant covering North Korea, and I've covered North Korea off and on for the last 7 years.
Okay, wonderful. With that, let's go ahead and give you a preview of what you're going to see and hear from us today. So we want to talk to you and provide a nice chronology of the North Korean evolution and how they became this self-reliant global hacking force. And to do so, we're going to start out with a little bit of a survey. Caitlyn's going to go ahead and handle that survey, but we're going to really kind of show you the chronology. So how this all started 40 years ago and how we got to where we are today. So while academic and punitive, you'll start to see some themes that came out in the talks that Ian and Thomas and others have given so far about how North Korea is very innovative and adaptive. And through their programmatic evolution from being, frankly, the need to self-survive since they were established in the 40s, they have become quite adept at being able to immerse and evolve, including hopping in different illicit trade networks and the such. So we will hopefully wrap up. And our goal here is actually to get the schedule back on time a little bit. So if we're moving at a quick pace, that is why. Caitlyn, let me turn it over to you. You tell me when to click the next slide.
All right, next slide. So we wanted to start off by framing what it looks like to be a hacker in North Korea. And so if you have big dreams of joining the Workers' Party of Korea someday and you want to get out of your peasant village and bring honor to your family, what does it actually take to be a hacker? And the key thing to know is that if you are not gifted in math and science, you have very low odds of being successful. In fact, don't even bother if you're not already gifted in math and science. And so, what you actually need to do is start as early as you possibly can, age 5 to 7, drilling math questions, drilling science questions, preparing to take the national test for placement in the schools that then feed into the cyber program as a whole. And training generally starts in primary school with path to elite secondary schools in the capital. Next slide. And so the thing we really want to start off by hammering home is that the academic foundations of the cyber program have really provided the foundation starting over 40 years ago for what we see now with the program today. So in the early 1980s, the academic experience was really through the Soviet Union exchanges with visiting computer scientists and mathematicians, and acquiring foreign textbooks that were then scanned and used for curriculum design. And then what we saw in is that Kim Jong Il, the leader, decided that there really needed to be dedicated training for elite cyber warriors. And in this period, Mirim College was founded with a 2-year cyber intelligence and warfare program that admitted approximately 100 students per year. This program, still to this day, is extremely selective and designed to train the elite that will feed into the North Korean cyber apparatus. And this has actually been renamed in the intervening years and is now known as the Pyongyang University of Automation, and it actually offers a 5-year program in cyber intelligence and warfare. And now there are at least 7 universities that train future GPRK cyber warriors. You'll see them listed on the right of the slide here. And these schools all offer various courses and lengths of study in computer science, hacking, network design, cyber warfare, psychological warfare, with the goal of feeding into this broader cyber ecosystem and building that capacity for North Korea. Next slide. So I'll pass it now to John to talk about sort of where this academic foundation led the North. Hey, John, I think you're muted. We didn't hear anything on this slide.
Cool. I appreciate that, Caitlin. All right. So, in short, what you'll find throughout this briefing is we'll give you a bunch of different allegories as well as quotes. And this first one here is a seminal quote by Kim Jong Il. Promise that these are not made up by AI, but instead they're actually coming from dear leaders himself. So this first one here, if the internet is like a gun, cyber attacks are atomic bombs. And really throughout this, we'll actually see a recurrence thematically play through where there's an emphasis on the need for the regime, for the party, for the intelligence services to actually invest in capabilities that would otherwise elevate their posture on the geopolitical stage. So understanding IT and IT related issues will help, in a nutshell, provide that asymmetric advantage that will, in fact, start to promulgate and overcome different obstacles that the regime is encountering. This harpens back again to kind of the origin stories in the 1940s where North Korea was kind of enclosed and they had to fend for themselves. Our second most fun quote here, all wars in the future will be computer wars. And then it goes on to say during a very emphatic speech that was given to his military commanders, even I am trying to learn how to use a computer for an hour a day. So during this time frame, we saw exchanges, and it wasn't with the Russians entirely. We actually saw top students being sent to China and Iran and Russia for IT trainings. So part of this, while it was being used for technology transfer, gaining insights into different books and texts that were then translated into the Korean language itself for integration into the broader curriculums, we were also seeing um, the development of skills that were necessary too. So understanding the culture and how they were being integrated, understanding how computers are being used. And as kind of history showcases itself, there was an ebbing and flowing as different relations changed. So as the Soviet Union ended up getting dissolved, we saw a natural kind of impasse and a stopping point there to the point where some of the curriculum started to integrate it. So while Caitlin talked on about Mirim University and the stand-up or the first establishment of a hacking type university in 1986, the next one we saw is in 1997 with Marmbong University, where as we look back at the records and the curriculum, we start to see the training pipeline being developed specifically for these high-tech skills with a specific emphasis here on code breaking and cracking and fracking and hacking. As we flash forward to the next decade, or technically the late 1990s, early 2000s, we start to see a thawing of relations between North and South Korea and a global welcoming to a certain degree of North Korea into the broader economy if they are willing to pay concessions. Um, so the Sunshine Policy is the first foray at that, which which was the thawing between North Korea and South Korea and arrangements being made between the two. Second, which came on the tails of it, is six-party talks. And through this time frame, we saw for about a 5, 6 year period, South Korean IT workers and North Korean IT workers working together. No, I don't mean in the global sense where they're actually trying to create crypto and steal money and infiltrate companies, but actually changing skills. So it was actually designed more as an training and technical training program for both sides, of which once the six-party talks actually started to dissolve, we saw North Korea use its newly acquired insights and intellect against South Korea and the West. As we flash forward to the end of the 2000s, we see the stand-up of the RGB, so the intelligence service that is most that houses most of the cyber units that's inside of the DPRK, and the first kind of cyber attacks take place. So North Korea's introduction to using cyber as a tool of asymmetric warfare takes place with Operation Troy, where there were DDoS attacks taking place against the financial sector of South Korea, as well as in the US. And as we move throughout the decades, the early 2010s really kind of when North Korea started sharpening, started really polishing their capabilities, focusing and shifting based on mission needs. 10 Days of Rain ends up being an extension of Operation Troy. Here we've got kind of a 3 year bounded window where North Korea was just being a nuisance, where they were trying to annoy the South Koreans, much like South Korea putting those speakers up on North Korean borders. It just is really kind of designed to annoy your enemies. In 2013, we see a flashpoint. This flashpoint is this quote that we're going to give you here. Cyber warfare is an all-purpose sword that guarantees North Korean people's army ruthless striking capability. The quote further goes on to exemplify and draw parallels to cyber being the equivalent of having a nuclear power, having a armament that is capable of having that level of deterring effect. This is also the same year that we start to see North Korea using wipers. So there was a series of wiper attacks that took place against South Korea, Dark Souls, the campaign, if you're looking for it. And then as it progresses, we see two things happen in close succession. North Korea used its asymmetric ability here in retaliation or to voice frustration that hits a threshold just short of military response. Now, the Sony Pictures attack was kind of a seminal moment here, not that it received kind of reprimand for it attacking a US company, but more so that there was a physical threat of violence for anybody who actually went to the theaters against the companies. Right around the same time, we started to see different elements of the RGB compromise critical infrastructure in South Korea and leak key plans. Those key plans came in the way of nuclear reactors. So information about employees from KHMP, as well as, flash forward a few years later, being able to compromise South Korea's high side, getting onto their high side network and steal wartime plans. So as tensions started to arise between both the US, Western powers, and North Korea, we started to see an intense focus on being able to really thrive in that self-sustaining manner that North Korea has been able to exhibit in the past, showing both operational resilience as well as organizational resilience too. It is around this time we also started to see North Korea really dip its toes into, well, how can we use the IT work that we've been training our internal citizens on to be able to generate revenue for us? Now, early days IT worker stuff was mostly geopolitical placement, so placed in different countries, picking up things like freelance work for software development. Um, Big whole maximum pressure campaign that utterly kind of failed to PNG and get these guys out resulted in what we see today as kind of the new wave of IT workers. But before we get there, let's talk through some of these other cases. Now, while they were kind of covered as high points, Bangladesh Bank was a textbook example of North Korea watching the cybercrime ecosystem evolving and testing it. If we look back to the history books, we see the Bangladesh Bank exhibited the exact same playbook that Carberang did just years prior that Kaspersky had reported on. 2017 shows this adaptation, so it happens in two folds here. One playing with big boy toys, so playing with NSA exploits that were used to globally spread across and ransomware significant portions of China as well as the UK. And then, while not listed on here too, being adaptable inside of an operational environment, compromising AV servers and using the service counts to actually distribute and gain further access. So now we get up to kind of the crypto era. Two things kind of happen here. North Korea operations become more widely known thanks to their compromise of the Polish Financial Supervisory Authority, netting them access into about 100 banks worldwide. Then they start to diversify. As defenses tamper down, as the world starts looking, as security researchers start really honing in on how can we defend, they pivot. And pivoting ends up being a very uh, thematic representation of what we see happen here throughout North Korea, especially to help bolster its financial coffers. Over to you, Caitlin, to wrap us up.
Thanks, John. Hopefully no more cyber gremlins in the machine, although those pesky IT workers are probably out there clicking your mute button. So what we really want to drive home is that what we've seen in the 2020s is what we consider to be Cyber-Juche in action. This idea that the North Korean program, built from the 1980s until today, has really capitalized on those investments in education, building a dedicated workforce, and experimenting over the intervening decades with which ways are most impactful for the cyber program to act as a mechanism of state power. And some of this has been touched on in other presentations, so we won't go into too much detail here. But from what we see when we look back across the North Korean cyber program, there's really some critical things that happen in the early 2020s that dictate where the program has moved to today. And chief among those is the COVID-19 pandemic. North Korea closed their borders. Very little could go in and out, very little in terms of traditional revenue generation through trade. Those international sanctions continue to bite. There's a lack of international presence because of those closed borders. A lot of embassies are being shut down throughout 2020 into even as recently as last year. And new research centers are created and reorganized for new mission support. So we see that there are a number of organizations that start to break into open source indictments, sanctions designations as being affiliated in some way with malicious North Korean cyber activity. And you'll see them listed on the slide here: the Ministry of National Defense, the Munitions Industry Department, both of which have largely IT worker subordinate units that are tasked primarily with revenue generation, although some of them also conduct what we would consider to be hacking activity. The Ministry of State Security has a mandate to collect against intel requirements, but also to target defectors and South Korea. And then, of course, the RGB still operating as that premier intelligence organization where we see the bulk of North Korean cyber activity. Next slide. And so what we're really seeing now is the Kim regime being able to use this concept of Cyber-Juche and this extreme self-reliance as a means to accomplish regime priorities. So because of everything that the North experienced in the late 2010s into 2020 and 2021 with the COVID pandemic, we saw that the program really lifted and shifted to be able to meet these new demands for high earning revenue generation, primarily using the IT workers that are subordinate to the MID and the M&D. Some of these units can earn millions of dollars per month, and some of them have even successfully infiltrated Fortune 500 companies, which, you know, for those of us who might be based in the West, that is a challenge for many of us as job seekers, and yet North Korea has it on lock. And also developing skills in new industries. So AI, blockchain, Web3 development, essentially anything that's an emerging tech. North Korea is there on the bleeding edge in terms of having workers that are ready and staged to take those jobs, to take freelance positions, and really infiltrate the IT space writ large. It's been touched on already that North Korea has an incredible apparatus for stealing cryptocurrency and moving that back to North Korea for whatever the regime decides to spend it on. But we also saw that there were a number of key espionage operations, primarily conducted by the RGB since 2020, to target missile technology, things that would inform the weapons program, and also that targeting of defectors that I mentioned earlier by the MSS. Next slide. So we wanted to take a pause and sort of show what we think is a really great graphic from a recent multi-government and private sector collaboration that demonstrates sort of best effort where all of the different organizations and cover companies, things you might see thrown around in open source, sit within the cyber program. So at the bottom of the chart, you'll see the RGB, you'll see the MID and M&D sort of off to the side on the right, the Ministry of State Security, of course, with a call out for what is tracked as AP237 and SCARcraft. And we wanted to use this org chart in conjunction with some of the other org charts that have been shared by other presenters as a way to really hammer home how much the program has evolved, how many different organizations are a part of this system of self-reliance through cyber warfare and cyber power projection. And also highlight that this is an excellent resource for any aspiring DPRK watchers in terms of being able to track some of the more recent operations. The Multilateral Sanctions Monitoring Report on cyber was published back in October, and if you type that into Google Box, it should pop up for you. It's a lengthy read, but well worth it in our opinion. So wanted to make sure we had a call out for this here. Next slide.
Caitlin, it's probably worth us calling out while we're on this slide that it seems like these groups can just adapt based on mission mandate and probably based on their clout and the self-sufficiency strategy they bring along with it, can take and shape different organizations, bleeding into some of the overlaps we see across the groups.
Absolutely. And I think that what is another important takeaway is that the names and the alignments that you see here on this chart are not necessarily reflective even of what the program looks like today at present, but instead are our way of organizing based on the information that's available to try to make a sort of best estimates on alignment. And to John's point, you know, we can definitely see individuals moving between these organizations and groups or moving between mission sets. Next slide for real this time. So what's next? What we want to leave you with in terms of Cyber-Juche takeaways is that the 40 plus years of history of cyber program have really created this adaptive cyber force. So all of the organizations that you saw on the previous slide are continuously evolving, continuously receiving new mission mandates, and are summing together to form a really high volume of activity originating from DPRK. And the other thing that we want to hammer home to that point is that DPRK is a really sophisticated cyber actor. They may not necessarily get as much airtime as some of the other nation state actors, but they are really unique in terms of how the program is able to support not only their espionage goals, which we would expect to see from any nation state, but specifically that cyber criminal revenue generation and constantly inventing new ways to leverage this workforce that they've invested in over the last several decades. And to that end, it's our forward-looking assessment that the cyber program will adjust to meet Kim Jong Un's objectives. Those range from espionage, disruption, destruction, and of course that cyber criminal activity that has been such a common theme, I think, throughout the talks you've heard today. And I think we're tight on time, but we might have for one question.